first presenter will be Dr. Yuli Shan. He's an expert in climate change and sustainable transitions. His interdisciplinary research aims to reveal how human activities affect global and regional climate change. He also seeks alternative low-carbon approaches towards the achievement of climate targets and a net zero emission society. He's a global highly cited researcher since 2020 and a fellow of Royal Geographical Society since 2024. His research achievement and international reputation has resulted in more than 20 academic awards and about 160 plus publications in high impact journals and 60,000 plus citations, high profile media coverage, international conference and committee invitation, and contributing authorship for the IPCC Sixth Assessment Report. So today he's going to be talking to us on climate change mitigation versus adaptation, increasing air conditioning due to global warming, accelerate climate change. So Dr. Yuli Shan, are you there?
Hello, I'm here. Can you
Okay,
hear me well?
yes, I can hear you perfectly well. So I'm just going to share your
Good.
screen.
Okay, thanks a lot for inviting me for this conference. So here today, well, my topic is about increasing air conditioning due to global warming accelerates climate change, which will be a case study of the climate change mitigation versus adaptation. So here's the background. So we all know that our world is facing climate change, is facing global warming, and the average temperature has been increased significantly since last decades. And this figure shows the average temperature between June and August until 2040, 2039. And then this significant global warming leads to a surge in demand for air conditioning. So the air conditioning has been seen as one of the most effective and easiest way to adapt to climate change, adapt to the rising temperature and the frequent heat waves. But on the other hand, when we use the AC, it will consume a lot of energy consumption, and the electricity used for space cooling required around 6% of global total primary energy use. And this number, 60%, is increased from 2% 30 years ago. So you can see that there will be a surge in the energy demand related to AC use. So in our study, we want to quantify the we call it the vicious cooling cycle, the vicious cycle. So that's because if we use more air conditioning as adaptation to climate change, it will consume more energy and will generate more greenhouse gas emissions, and that will lead to more climate change and higher temperature. If people are experiencing higher temperature, they will use more air conditions. So that means this is a vicious cooling cycle, and this will burden our climate change mitigation actions. So that's why our recent study want to estimate the energy use and the greenhouse gas emissions from AC use on the various climate scenarios, and we will quantify such vicious cycles and also estimate global inequalities in the use of air conditioning. So here are the methods. So this is a little bit maybe too complex for you, but in very brief introduction. So we will have four key parts. The first is called global circulation models. The input data for that will be the daily mean near surface air temperature and relative humidity. And with the model, we can get the predicted cooling degree days for the future couple of years. So CDD will be used as the input for the next model, next IAM model, GCAM, and to calculate the energy consumption caused by the AC use, and also 8 types of greenhouse gas emissions caused by AC use. Then we further use the greenhouse gas emissions to calculate the additional temperature rise with the model MAGIC. And also we use empirical model to calculate the inequality thing. Yeah, we consider both the GDP as the income levels and also urbanization and also CDDs, so to include as many aspects as possible. So here the study framework and the data sources. I just skipped that. It's too much details here. And here the scope of GHG emissions from ACUs, which we include in our study. So from the ACUs, so we just collected several types of standard ACs and find that most of them, 99% of them use electricity and just 1% use natural gas. But in any case, the energy consumption here will emit CO2 emissions and SF6, CH4, and N2O, these four types of greenhouse gas emissions, no matter from the power plants and the power transmission and supply, and all from the use of natural gas. And on the other hand, the use of air conditions will have significant refrigerant leak. So this all these refrigerants are also greenhouse gas emissions. So this include these five types of greenhouse gas emissions, like C2, F6, N2, and three types of HFCs. So in total, 8 types of greenhouse gas emissions are considered in our study. And here is our scenarios, our climate scenarios. We use the framework of SSP and RCP scenarios to represent for the different development pathways of the society in the future. And we adopted five different scenarios from SSP1 to SSP5. So SSP1, RCP 1.9 is the most sustainable scenario, and SSP2, RCP 4.5 is the most reasonable one. So we will use that SSP 2.245 as a baseline scenario in this research. And we also have this highest scenario, which is based on fossil fuel energy system called SSP5, RCP 8.5. So we want to quantify the vicious cycle caused by ACUs on the different climate scenarios. The coverage thing, we will include 32 regions, which is set in the GCAP model. So here is some of our main results. The first is about the cooling demand. So the global cooling demand in 2050 is projected to increase by an average of 18% across different climate models. So the range would be from 10% to 88%, so quite a large range because due to the high uncertainty of the global climate models, but the average value would be 18%. And under the SSP 119 scenario, the most sustainable one, so by 2050, the cooling demand will be decreased across all global regions compared to compared to the level 2010. So that means under this scenario, the global temperature will decrease a little bit by 2050. Yeah. And there is also a considerable mismatch between regional cooling demand and economic development. For example, if we see this figure on the right hand top, the rich area like the Canada and Europe and Australia, they have relatively low level of cooling demand. But for some poor area like South Asian countries, African countries, and South American countries, they usually have a higher cooling demand. Yeah. And here, and then we here the results of the AC use, AC stock, and energy consumption. So if our results shows that the AC stock are projected to be around 1.6 billion units in 2050. And the highest increase is found in the scenario that combines the strong economic growth with the higher levels of global warming, that is SSP 585. The highest AC stock would be like 2.1 billion units in 2050. In terms of the energy consumption, the global AC energy consumption is projected to be increased by 4,500 TWh, which and while a higher number under the higher scenario SSP 585. Then use the energy consumption, we calculate the greenhouse gas emissions, and we find that for most scenarios, the greenhouse gas emissions from ACUs are projected to peak before 2040. That is under scenario 119 and scenario 126. That is because under these two scenarios, our global temperature will decrease a little bit after 2040. But in any case, the greenhouse gas emissions in 2050 will increase to 3.8 gigatons of CO2 equivalent in our baseline scenario, and 8.5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent under the highest scenario. Yeah. And SSP 370 scenario consume lower energy, but still contribute more greenhouse gas emissions compared to the baseline. That's because SSP 370 use a different energy structure because based on more fossil fuels. Yeah. And then with these greenhouse gas emissions, we calculate the temperature increase, that is the close of the vicious cycle. And we find that the global temperature will increase by additional 0.03 degrees C to 0.12 degrees C due to the use of additional air conditioner in response to the climate change. So that will be the close of the vicious cycle. And then we also calculate the global inequality in the use of AC conditioning. So the figures are the Lorentz figure and shows the Gini coefficient of the different of the AC use for different scenarios. We find that people with higher cooling demand but living in less developed regions, such as Sub-Saharan Africa, Pakistan, and South Asia, they usually have limited access to cooling facilities. So that will enlarge the inequality in terms of AC use. And they also find the distribution of energy consumption and expenditure for cooling would be more unequal than the GDP. So that means the economic inequality will be less than the climate change inequality. So that should be a very interesting result from our research. Okay, so here are our three key take-home message. For the most strict mitigation scenario, SSP 119, it can mitigate the vicious cycle from ACUs, but still contribute over 1.5 gigatons CO2 equivalent emissions, greenhouse gas emissions on average each year, with 0.03 degrees C temperature increase by 2050. And the use of AC for cooling is a crucial technological adaptation response, however, causing substantial conflicts between the mitigation and adaptation. And how to break this kind of vicious cycle, we emphasize that to achieve low carbon transitions in the energy system as early as possible, that is very important and urgent to break the vicious cycle. Okay, so that's all for my presentations. Thanks for your listening, and any questions if we have time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shan, for that wonderful presentation. So if you have any question, you can always drop it in the question chat box. So while we're waiting for other questions, I do have, it's very interesting to say that it is, of course, this heating, the cooling temperature or cooling demand in some countries, it's not the same as for other countries. But I was wondering because if the cooling demand is not the same across the continent, then what about the heating demand? Because if the temperature is low in some countries, it's high in other countries, right? So do you think it's probably going to be the same, or probably there's going to be trade-off
Yeah.
for heating or cooling demand in those kind of places?
Yeah, it is a good question. It is actually one of the comments we received from the referees. Actually, we did a review of the literature and find that the reduced in the heating demand could be very marginal. So so it cannot offset all the energy increase from the cooling demand. So that's still it will still be a problem for the increase of the cooling demand.
Okay, so thank you very much. So while we wait for other questions, I would probably move on to the next speaker. So you can always probably like go through the question section to see if there are questions you can respond to during the course of the
Thank you. Thank
session.
you.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much for coming.